Hi, my name is E01, and I am the founder and creator of a new ism called Antipolitism. It's a revolutionary movement meant to bring about the changes that we need in our society, our culture, and our politics. Now, all of that sounds very grandiose, and it also sounds very nutty. And I'm aware of that. So let me just start at the beginning and give you an overview of what we're talking about and talk to you about what I hope that you'll join me in today. All of us know something is very, very wrong. We're not quite sure what it is, but that's why Donald Trump was elected president. That's why millions of young people follow Bernie Sanders and buy into socialism, a system that has failed over and over and over again. But when you know that something's very, very wrong, you start grasping for alternatives. And when the only alternatives seem to be either socialism on one end or capitalism, as most people misunderstand it to be, on the other end, people start searching around for a solution. And the solutions they come up with depend on their backgrounds and, to a large extent, their ages. So the young tend to overwhelmingly gravitate towards socialism because they're too young to remember all of the massive, monumental failures of that system and the millions and millions of deaths and the suffering that it's caused ever since it's been tried at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century onward. On the other end of the spectrum, capitalism is grossly misunderstood because what most people don't really appreciate is we do not live in a capitalist system. Capitalism, I don't even like the word. It should really be exchanged for voluntarism. In other words, capitalism actually is just the non-system, the voluntary trade of goods and services between private individuals, and the key word is voluntary. You don't have to enter a transaction in a capitalist system unless you want to. So one side offers a service or a product, the other side decides if they're going to buy it or swap for it or whatever the case might be. And if they decide to do it, that's capitalism. So clearly we do not live in a capitalist system. We live in a crony capitalist system, or as I like to call it, crapitalism. We live in and it has failed because so many special interests have formed, all against the backdrop of politics, that it has perverted the system to the point where it's unrecognizable. Now, we may be in America the most quasi-capitalist, crapitalist system in the world, but we really are not a capitalist system. But all of that is as an aside. I don't want to get bogged down into this discussion today into that. Just understand that as a result of all of this, we all know something's very wrong. We've elected a carnival barker as president of the United States, a man whose background is, the only word you could use for it is putrid, a narcissistic behavior pattern that is almost unbelievable, yet people, good people, decent people, hardworking people who roll their eyes at some of the things he says and does, at his chronic lying and his really disgusting background, all put that aside because they were searching for something else, and at least he was different. On the other hand, young people who are still idealistic and having developed the scars and calluses that life will put upon us as age adds on to our experience, look at them and are just grossed out by the entire thing. And their alternative is socialism, because at least it isn't Trumpism, which is just a form, by the way, of populism and nationalism. There's so many isms. But that brings me to antipolitism. Antipolitism is an entirely new ism that I've created that answers all of the problems with all of the other isms. It is entirely voluntary, it selects from the best and the brightest, it is not elitist, and most importantly of all, it guarantees that no power will be accumulated by professionals and that there will be absolutely zero money in politics. Now, that's as much as I'm going to discuss antipolitism, except in broad strokes. You can tell I'm 62 years old. Broad strokes today. But you can read all about it by picking up a copy of A Radical Reset, the Antipolitist Manifesto, which you can buy in paperback or download for free on Amazon. And the link is on this podcast right this very second. Just look below the screen. You'll see the link. Pick it up. I'm not trying to get money from you per se. I'm just trying to enlighten you. And all of it is spelled out in A Radical Reset, which, by the way, not only is informative and will explain to you what antipolitism is and why there will be no money in politics and why it is as close to as perfect a political system as possible, the new ism, but it's also written in such a way that I think you'll find it entertaining. By the way, there is a certain amount of profanity in it because, what can I say, my mouth tends to be filthy. Now, like all revolutionaries, I have come from the bottom. All great revolutionaries come from the bottom, whether it's a carpenter in Nazareth or whether it's a corporal from Austria, for good or for evil. All revolutionaries come from strange places. They're never going to come from the mainstream. Revolutionary leaders will never form and never come and never develop and never come around with a revolutionary point of view, because if you're coming from the top, you're part of the status quo that's being revolted against. It is impossible for a revolutionary to come from the top. And yet once I was at the top, and I was one of those people participating in the status quo, and I was one of those people involved in finance, and I was one of those people who bought into all the standard stuff. And then, by my own actions, I brought upon myself my own downfall. And when I say downfall, a very precipitous downfall, from the very, very top to the very, very bottom, to the point where I ended up in prison. Yes, prison. And the circumstances of that and what I did, and I did it, and what I did to deserve going to prison are all spelled out in the preface of A Radical Reset, which again you can buy in paperback or download for free from Amazon. Now, I bring this all to you because also unique among revolutionary leaders and founders, I think, in history, I have no personal interest in power whatsoever. So unlike anyone who's come before me in the revolutionary sphere, unlike, you name it, again, for good or for evil, I myself have no desire to lead. I have no desire to be president. I have no desire to be dictator. I have no desire to be king. In fact, at 62 years old, my only desire at this point is to live long enough to make the contribution of anti-politism to our culture so that it takes root and fixes all of the things that are broken in our culture today. Now, we live in a time of social media, and because of social media, we also live in an echo chamber of our own points of view. Unfortunately, fortunately, the good part of the internet is that an enormous library of information, all of the world's knowledge is open to us if we only choose to look for it. The downside of the internet is that there's so much bullshit on it. And there's so much bullshit on the internet, there's so many lies, there's so much fake news, to use the term that's used commonly today. There's so much nonsense information that how do you delineate one from the other? And the fact of the matter is most of us don't bother to try. Because really what the internet is devolved into is an echo chamber of our own points of view. So for example, my economic point of view clearly is free market. So I tend to gravitate towards free market chat rooms, websites, Facebook pages. And I read a lot of the stuff that's on there, and it's just people agreeing with each other. And because I am seeking to lead a revolutionary movement, and as part of that, I want to reach out to young people in particular, because young people are the most open to new ideas, I tend to gravitate and also listen to and read into and pay attention to what's being said on the leftist and socialist Facebook pages and websites. And it's all just people agreeing with each other. And whenever a voice of dissent comes up on any of these pages and in any of these groups, they're shouted down, and they're usually shouted down in unbelievable ugliness. Furthermore, the people that run for office today are never the best and the brightest. Why not? Because to run for office today means to open yourself up to public ridicule and destruction. Let me just use one example. And by the way, as I use this example, since we're just talking between the two of us, and you're watching me here, and there's just no need to yell at each other. Just listen to what I have to say. I'm going to use the example of the nomination to the Supreme Court of Brett Kavanaugh. Now, I don't care if you're conservative or liberal. This is not going to be a discussion in his relative merit as a judge. I only want to talk about what happened when he was nominated. Now, here's a man who's in his mid-50s. He has a wife and 2 daughters. He's a devout Roman Catholic, and there is not a hint of scandal in his background. So much so that after all the scouring that went on before he was nominated, they came to the conclusion, they being the administration that nominated him, came to the conclusion that he was free of scars. Yet somehow, someone trolled up a woman who knew him when he was evidently 17 years old. Her name was Christine Blasi Ford, or is Christine Blasi Ford. Now, Dr. Ford is a professor, I believe it's at Berkeley, and if I'm wrong, that has really nothing to do with what I'm saying. But I bring that up because Berkeley is a traditional liberal institution, and she is, I believe, a psychology professor at Berkeley. And anyway, her accusation that she made, an accusation that was deemed, by the way, not credible originally, by Senator Feinstein, whose office it actually sprang from. Senator Feinstein looked at that at the time and looked at her allegation, that is Christine Blasi Force, and saw that there was no corroboration, no evidence, and after all, it took place when he was 17 years old, and the allegation was that he got handsy. Now, it wasn't an allegation of rape, and when I say handsy means he went testosterone blind. If you believe her story, he did what so many other 17-year-old boys do. He went testosterone blind and got pushy at a party, but when she said no, it was no, she left, she felt in humiliation, and she went home. He didn't rape her, he didn't pull her clothes off, there was no nudity involved, there was no sex involved, there was no violence involved. It was basically ridicule and made her feel small. Now, there's no evidence that this party ever took place. Nobody that was at the supposed party this was at, there was a party at the time, ever remember seeing Christine Blasey Ford. She could produce no corroborating witnesses. She has no idea where the party was. She has no idea how she got home from the party. And nobody, again, remembers that she was ever there. But let's just say for a moment that you believe her, that at 17, Brett Kavanaugh went testosterone blind and got handsy with a 17-year-old girl. Let's say that's all true. And the only reason this story became public was, even though Senator Feinstein herself, who, by the way, is basically, as far as I can tell, as politicians go, no better or worse than any of them on the right or left, she decided it wasn't credible, but one of her staffers, some zealot on her staff, released this story to the press. And of course, in the echo chamber that is modern social media, it was brought out. And anyway, they put this man through hell. Now, you'd have to believe that for 37 years since that time, the man completely changes. In other words, a rapist at 17, suddenly for the rest of his life, or a victimizer of women, then for the rest of his life became a great guy. And that just doesn't happen. Take it from a guy that was in prison. Pieces of shit are pieces of shit forever. The recidivism rate among men who perpetrate violence on women, and rape is a crime of violence, not a crime of sex, not a crime of sexuality. It's a crime of violence. And these violent men are violent for life. The recidivism rate on rapists and pedophiles, and I myself am a victim of a pedophile, by the way, I know what I'm talking about, is 100%. They do not get better. So you'd have to believe that for 37 years since, that Brett Kavanaugh simply changed. And that's impossible. He couldn't have. So the benefit of the doubt in the system that we're supposed to be living in, where you're innocent till proven guilty, should have gone with Brett Kavanaugh, but it did not. And they made his life a fucking living hell. And by the time he finally got confirmed, by the slimmest of margins, okay, it was only because, well, in the end, the Republicans backed him and the Democrats did, and they controlled the Senate, and that's the only reason he was approved. The Democrats, and I believe that most of them privately, in their heart of hearts, knew that this man was being treated horribly, went along with this because, again, in the social media echo chamber that is modern politics, the politics of destruction are normal. Now, here's the thing. Put that aside. I'm not here to comment any more on Brett Kavanaugh. I'm using that as a metaphor of why nobody decent runs for office. Nobody with an ounce of shame in their life, nobody with an ounce of class in their life, nobody who's ever done anything remotely bad in their life would ever run for office. And let's be honest. You know, Jung said we all have a shadow self. We all have a dark side. You have a dark side and I have a dark side. The difference between you and me and the fact that I went to prison is that my dark side was exposed, and I think actually for my own personal betterment, for the best. But that's, again, as an aside. The fact of the matter is, everybody who's decent, everybody who's done anything in their life, anyone who's accomplished anything, anybody who's done anything productive and constructive with their life, has done some shitty things along the way. There is no such thing as a perfect person. There is no such thing as the hero that essentially shits marble. All of us are human. All of us do bad things. All of us have things in our background we'd rather not have brought out. So those of us who are the best and the brightest, male and female, black and white, Asian, Jewish, Christian, it doesn't matter, Muslim, nobody runs for office who has an ounce of shame. What does that leave? Sociopaths. We basically get a government of sociopaths, a government made up of people who, for the pursuit of power, they're willing to sacrifice everything in their lives. All decency, all honor. They don't care about protecting their families. You know, I look at a guy like, for example, Bill Clinton, who exposed his daughter, Chelsea, to what he had done to run for office. Why would he do that? He knew it was going to come out. He knew his daughter was going to find out. Either that or he's stupid. And I got to be honest with you, he's the furthest thing from stupid. I mean, would anyone accuse Bill Clinton of being stupid? And yet He exposed his daughter to all of this stuff. Why would he do that? Because he's a sociopath. And I don't want to just pick on Democrats. There are plenty of Republicans that are exactly the same way, who run for office and are shameless. They know all of these things are going to come out. They know that their family's going to be exposed to it. They know that they're going to be embarrassed. But power is such an aphrodisiac. The attraction of power is so powerful. They have to have it so badly that they're willing to basically sell their souls to hold office. And once they're in office, what do? Well, they spend 40 hours a week. That's a real statistic, raising money for the next time the election comes up. And since the people that would challenge them later down the road don't have the advantage of being able to walk out of their lives and spend 40 hours a week raising money, they just stay in office forever. All money corrupts politics on the right or the left. That's why anti-politism is so vital, because it gets all money out of politics. It gets all parties out of politics. It gets all ideas of left or right out of politics. Anti-politism is a system of democracy that is also pragmatic. Anti-politism is neither left nor right. It's what works. It's what works while at the same time preserving the liberty that is the most important thing in a free society. Now, after you read A Radical Reset, the Manifesto of Antipolitism, and assuming that you buy into it, let's talk about how we're going to bring this about, because all great movements start with an idea. I've invented the idea. Actually, the truth is I didn't invent the idea so much as I discovered it. Antipolitism was always there, hidden in a veil of everybody's, vicious opinions back and forth. And in the ugliness of political discourse, nobody saw what was already there. But in the quiet of prison, believe it or not, when I had hours and hours on my hands, when I did nothing but walk around a track every day and think, it came to me. And that's how the idea gestated, and that's where the idea came from. So let's assume okay, you've read it, you buy into it, you say this is great, but now you're going to say to yourself, unless you're unlike anybody else, well, that'll never happen. Because that's what we always do. Even the best things, our first reaction is cynicism. That'll never happen. But all great movements, I don't care about that, because all great movements, all revolutionary movements, all changes to humanity begin, with a very improbable revolutionary. It's always some guy from the bottom. Again, like I said, and I've been at the bottom, I'm the improbable revolutionary. I'm so flawed. I don't know if any of you ever saw the movie Four Weddings and a Funeral. And there's a great scene at the end of the movie where Andy McDowell is standing out in the rain, and Hugh Grant, who's the male protagonist, is trying to get her to come inside and, to the happy denouement. You can watch the movie if you haven't seen it. And she's soaking wet. And he says, come in out of the rain. And she says, you get, and I'm paraphrasing, she says, you get to the point where you're so wet, you can't get any wetter. Well, that's me. I am so exposed. My flaws and foibles have been so exposed, are so out there, and are true, to be perfectly honest. There's really nothing else that could possibly come out that would possibly embarrass me. Unfortunately, I didn't plan for that to happen. It just happened. Or maybe I did. It was just a flaw, because I'm a human being and I have a flawed nature, and I'm about as flawed a human being as they come. But we're all complicated people. We all have our good side and our bad side. And through the destruction that I brought upon myself and the damage that I did to other people, that I'd talk to you about it now, but it's too painful a subject. Let's just say that not a day goes by that I don't think about the carnage that I wreaked on the lives of people that trusted and believed in me and that I called friends. But anyway. So anyway, as a result of this, I'm just going to let myself be out there. I'm going to sacrifice myself on the altar of ugliness, because I know that's what's going to happen if anti-politism takes hold. And at the very same time, I have disqualified myself. One of the disqualifying factors to ever serve, in anti-politism, basically, public service is converted from a career to a duty, okay? And I've excluded myself from the possibility of selection to that duty because I rule out all ex-felons. And frankly, I'm not interested in holding power anyway, and I'm sure there are, I think I would probably be fine, except that here's the thing. Why take the chance? There are millions of people who are capable and competent and can come to pragmatic solutions and can govern properly without the stink of the corruption of power and money and special interests and having to raise money. So why do I have to take a chance and include a group that includes a lot of very, very bad people? Take it from me, who served in prison. Most of the people belong there. I mean, I met one person the whole time I was in prison that I thought was actually innocent, and I met thousands while I was in there. So and I'm not exaggerating. And I'm a personable person, and I talked to lots, and I met one innocent person One innocent person the entire time I was in prison, over 4 years. Okay, so aside from digression, let's get back to it. So you'll read Antipolitism, you'll see it's a system that can work, and then you're going to say to yourself, that'll never happen. Well, it'll never happen if we don't start a movement, and that movement is not going to happen on the internet. The problem with the internet is it's so unpersonal. It's so easy just to shout things down. It's so easy to destroy each other on the internet. It's so easy to just be cynical. It brings out the crazies. It brings out all the worst in everybody because they're hidden behind the shield of the computer itself, and they don't have to expose themselves to debate. So, while I plan to use the internet to spread the word of anti-politism, the actual organization itself is why I'm reaching out to you today. I am looking to you, those of you out there who want to get involved, who read A Radical Reset, who then believe in what anti-politism teaches. We need to form a network in communities across the country, and it all begins with one individual in as many communities as possible, and that's why I'm reaching out to you. I'm looking to you to join me in the anti-politics movement as an initial organizer, as a fellow founder of the movement. And all that means is whatever you want it to mean. But basically it comes down to this. In your living room, among your friends, you share the vision of anti-politism. You form discussion groups. You invite other people to join in with you. You innovate. You use your own good ideas to create as much interest as you possibly can in communication with me here at the center. I will be your guide. You will be my proselyte, for lack of a better term. And together we'll form an organization and a community of anti-politics across the country, one person at a time. It starts with you. Perhaps you talk to your spouse. The two of you have a good friend. You sit down and say, take a look at this. You talk about it in the living room. You talk about, what's good about it, what you agree, what you don't agree. And anti-politism is just a system. And it takes no point of view. Again, it's pragmatic. It's a way of operating that takes all. When you get into it, you can't say no to it. It just makes such perfect sense. You begin to share it with your children. They share it with their friends. You spread it across the country. And one leads to two leads to four. If you take a penny and you put it on a chessboard and you double that penny, by the time you get to the end, on every square of the chessboard, by the time you get to the end, starting with 1 cent, you end up with more money than exists in the world today. That's the power of compounding. And it's powerful, but it all starts with 1 penny. In this case, it all starts with one person. By the way, if you don't believe me, there's plenty. It's on the internet. Look that up. What if you start with a penny on the first square of a chessboard and you double the penny on every square? 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8. How much money do you have on the last square? It'll blow your mind. And that's the power of reaching out to each other. You reach out to a friend, they reach out to a friend, they reach out to a friend, and all of you reach out through me. Now, from the center, I will continue to form different, let's just say, levels of participation for those of you who become the most active, including direct contact. I'll talk to you directly. We'll speak on the telephone. We'll speak by Skype. I'll help you organize. I'll help you form your groups. I'll have interaction with you, and we'll develop together an organization that will, I don't know, what's the right word, evolve over time into a national movement, and it can happen very fast. And now is the most important time, because the COVID-19 virus and the global shutdown of the economy, thereby leading to trillions and trillions of dollars of fiat currency being printed, is the last straw that will break the camel's back. We are now within 1 to 3 years of total global financial collapse, a dollar currency collapse that will thereby lead to the collapse of all world currencies and bring about a cataclysm much more severe than the Great Depression ever was. Look, and I'm not here to scare you, by the way. I just want to. There is an audio podcast. Before I started this video podcast, I started an audio podcast called The Radical Reset. It's available wherever you listen to podcasts. The Radical Reset with E.H. Ivins. I've put a link on the screen down below to make your life easy to go and listen to The Radical Reset. And on it is a podcast called COVIDnomics. And in COVIDnomics, it goes on for over an hour. It explains the economics of COVID and why it will lead to global financial collapse. So I'm not going to get into it here. Simply click on the link to The Radical Reset. Listen to it. What's nice about an audio podcast is you can listen to it in your car, you can listen to it while you're out running or while you're working out, or whatever it is that, while you go fishing, whatever it is that you do, and you don't have to sit in front of a computer and look at my ugly face talking. So here I'm going to keep it brief. But this is the moment. And history hasn't come to an end. In every century, every century terrible things happened. In the 20th century, there was World War I, World War II, the Holocaust, Vietnam, Korea, you name it. In this century, the most horrible thing that's happened up till now has been 9/11. 3,000 people dying in downtown New York City. And I don't mean to belittle that in any way, but that is not anywhere near the scale of World War I and 100 million people died, more than 100 million people died in the wars of the 20th century. Another 100 million people died at the hands of communism. The destruction of the 20th century dwarfs 9/11, and we're not going to be that lucky. As horrible as that was, and again, in no way am I downplaying the tragedy. There's the loss of those people in downtown New York City, but it is not anywhere near what can happen when the shit hits the fan. And we're going to have a depression in this century that's going to make the Great Depression of the last century seem like a happy memory. And it's all going to come about because of the collapse of the dollar. That's going to undermine everything that we believe in, because the money is like the mortar between the bricks of our culture. And when we lose faith in it, and when it falls away, it's chaos. And there has to be something to replace it, because look at the isms that are available if we don't buy into anti-politism. There's socialism, which is just another word for dictatorship in the end. And in the end, it's always failed, and it's always brought about misery. Hundreds, millions and millions and millions of deaths in the 20th century. I don't know how many people have to die before people figure out that socialism doesn't work. I don't know how many freedoms have to be lost before people figure out that socialism is simply a metaphorical term for dictatorship in the end. Whether it's dictatorship of an elite or a dictatorship of an individual, it's all just dictatorship. Fascism, nobody wants fascism. Statism, dictatorship, monarchy. I mean, what's the choice? The only choice, the only thing that's going to work, our own democracy as we have it today, is corrupt. It is irredeemably corrupt, okay? There's too much money, there are too many special interests, it's too grossed out between the right and the left, it cannot be redeemed. We must replace it with a new democratic system that saves the day, and that system is anti-politism. And it begins, as I said, with you. Read the book. Learn what it is. Listen to my podcasts. Watch my videos. Let's form an organization. Let's start building at the community level. Start talking to me one-on-one. I understand that you got to crawl before you walk, and you walk before you run. And right now, if you're not viewing me with a healthy dollop of skepticism, well, then you wouldn't be normal. And I know that you're completely normal, and I know you're a regular human being just like me. So look, I'm not holding myself forth as the savior of mankind. I'm simply the guy that discovered the system that's going to save mankind. But it's a system that depends on all of us working together, me and you in community, to restore what's decent, to restore virtuousness to our society, to bring back all the good things that we've thrown out while we've tried to fix what's bad. You know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And those of us who have participated in democracy up to now, aside from the political class, which is, by the way, more than half lawyers, which are nothing more than paid intellectual trained prostitutes. I don't understand how people don't figure. How is it that 60% of our Congress is lawyers and less than 1% of our population is? Let's just think about that for a moment. And you know that a lawyer is somebody that will advocate no matter what the point of view is that he or she is advocating for. They're trained intellectual prostitutes, and this is who is leading us. We have got to change the system. We've got to bring the decent within it. We've got to bring in those people who have something to offer as a sense of duty. It cannot be a career. There cannot be money in it. Hell, we just have to change the whole thing. And that's what this is all about. Okay, I'm going to start getting repetitive now because I'm purposely trying to avoid getting into any small details and any little fine points. So I'll just leave it there. Pick up the book, click on the link. Oh, by the way, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you click the subscription button. Be sure you click to the notification button, because I'm going to go through various parts of antipolitism and ideas to fix the future as time goes by. And then start organizing. Reach out to me. Let's get together. Let's build the organization. Let's change America. Let's change the world. And that's where I'm going to leave it today. For now, I'm E.H. Ivins, signing off.